What's up, everybody? I am happy to post this interview with Dr. Robert George. Dr. George is a professor of law and jurisprudence at Princeton, and he's kind of one of the, I would say, an honorary member of the intellectual dark web, although I don't think I've seen him on that official list yet. But he's a free speech advocate, he's a conservative Catholic, politically conservative, has been an advisor to presidents, a very accomplished scholar. I've really enjoyed reading his scholarship. And I caught up with him. This interview is actually something I taped last year, but I taped it at the ACCS conference in July of last year. And since I just attended the ACCS conference again this year, I thought it would be finally time to post it, get it edited together. It's been a bit of a busy year. So I hope you enjoy this interview about classical education. Welcome to the Buhler Report. We're here with Dr. Robert George, and we're talking today about classical education. That's the theme of the conference. And I just had a couple questions for you. Number one is about the allegiance between the classical education movement and political conservatism. Because most of the schools I've been involved with have been politically or socially conservative. Do you think that's a necessary relationship, or is it a strong correlation?
It's certainly a strong correlation, and there's a limited sense, but only limited, in which it's a necessary relationship. If we're talking about a classical Christian school, then the Christian commitment will entail certain socially conservative convictions. Okay. It doesn't mean you have to buy into the whole Republican Party agenda or the conservative movement's whole agenda. But it certainly means that you're promoting the idea among your young people of respect for human life in all stages and conditions, of marriage as the conjugal union of husband and wife and the basic unit of society on which all else depends, and religious freedom and the rights of conscience. Now, there's no reason in principle that those things have to be considered conservative values, but in our contemporary politics, for better or worse, they're counted as conservative values. I don't care whether you call them conservative or not. I care that they're true. They are certainly upheld by the Christian faith, authentically understood. So I do think that a classical Christian school will honor those basic values and seek to promote and transmit them. Now, if it's a classical Christian school, it's going to be a school that understands itself as independent of government control of the curriculum. That will reflect a belief that there should be a robust civil society, there should be room for a robust civil society, that education should not be a state monopoly, that private and religious education should be permitted to compete on fair terms with state-sponsored education, if there's to be state-run schools. So there too, those values today, the idea of a robust civil society, the idea of subsidiarity, of limited government, of a realm that the government ought really to stay out of so that it can be left to private initiative and private associations. Today that's associated with the conservative point of view. Now, again, I don't care whether you call it conservative or not. That used to be known as the classical liberal point of view. I've often remarked that contemporary conservatives, of which I'm one, really are old-fashioned liberals. They're old-fashioned Madisonian Tocquevillian liberals. So it doesn't matter to me.
Liberalism has left you.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, the label has left.
Yeah.
But the substance is there, and if you believe that, and today people want to call that conservative, yeah, then I think there is a connection, not just a correlation, but a connection between classical Christian schools and conservatism. But there are lots of other things. I mean, there's no classical Christian school obligation to favor a progressive income tax as opposed to a value-added tax or a consumption tax. There's no reason to have one view rather than another on global warming or the environment or various forms of economic regulation. These are domains in which reasonable people of goodwill, including reasonable Christians of goodwill, legitimately disagree, and in those areas I would counsel classical Christian schools to respect the liberty of students and families to make up their own minds. There's no need to be pushing any particular agenda. Just you want to develop in your young people the powers of critical thinking that will enable them to decide for themselves on the basis of informed judgment what their position ought to be on whether there should be a progressive income tax or a sales tax. Whether if we're going to have a progressive income tax, top marginal rate should be at 42% or 31%.
I find it's a little bit of a paradox because I want the classical model that we've basically polished and perfected, and it's working so well all over the country. You know, every time a school opens up, it seems like they double, triple, quadruple their numbers within several years. And I want that model to be more widely accessible, but I'm very sensitive to the criticism from the kind of very progressive left-wing side of things that, well, classical great books are written by dead white European males, you know, and this is an elitist form of education. I don't think those are true, but I'm sensitive. I want to be able to say, no, this kind of education is for you too, even if you come out disagreeing with me on all of those points.
I suspect that the kind of people you're worrying about there, and I'd urge you not to worry about them too much. I spend an awful lot of time in my ordinary day with such people, among such people. I wouldn't worry about them too much because these are the kind of people who suppose that St. Augustine is a dead white European male. So ignorance may be bliss,
Okay.
but it does not make for informed and helpful criticism. I want you and I want your students to be reading stuff by non-European, probably non-white authors like St. Augustine. Let's begin with the Confessions or the City of God. And those ancient Greeks, are we really going to give them up because they're dead white males? Who has greater wisdom in our tradition, or in any tradition, than Plato or Aristotle or Roman writers like Cicero? And it doesn't have to be European. I've often remarked, Keith, nothing would please me more than for more of our students to read the writings of Mahatma Gandhi, especially his writings on population control and sexual morality. Our friends on the left, who often praise Gandhi and say that we should be looking at non-Western writers, I don't hear them urging the reading of Gandhi's writings in that domain. Gee, I wonder why.
That's boulderized a little bit. So that would be sort of one of the many ways that we can expose ourselves to a wide range of views, like you were talking about, the best arguments for and against our own views, and let the students work out their critical thinking skills. I
think that's right, and I think if we make a big effort to expose our students to the best, to quote Matthew Arnold, the best that's been thought and said, that's going to include a range of different colors and people of both sexes. I'm an old-fashioned guy. I believe there are only two. People from different cultures. I mean, is the 20th century produced a greater philosopher than your own field is philosophy, right?
Yeah.
Than Elizabeth Anscombe?
Yeah.
Last I checked, she was female. Yeah, let's have our students read that. If the left wants us reading more women, absolutely, I'm for it. Let's have some Anscombe.
Yeah.
In fact, let's have Anscombe's writings on sexual morality right at the top of the list, or her writings on the sanctity of human life, her writings against abortion. Let's do that. You want more women? We'll give them to you for sure, and the best.
A whole semester on Anscombe. That would be
yeah.
very edifying. Wow. So this is something, I don't know if you have thought about this in your context, overlapping sort of politics, philosophy, Christianity, Catholicism. But where do you think is the next step for the classical education movement? One good thing for us to do is stay the course, build more schools, and make it so that our students are a significant portion of the population. That seems to me clear.
No question.
Is there anything else you think that we might be able to do to kind of expand?
Well, we're here in Pittsburgh at that wonderful meeting that you and I are attending of people involved with classical Christian education, really from across the country. And I just gave remarks, and in the Q&A session after the remarks, I made the point that we need to make sure that our classical Christian schools do not replicate the worst in contemporary progressive or secular progressive education by becoming indoctrination centers or re-education camps rather than true educational institutions. So I urged, and I'll repeat it now, I urge classical Christian educators to make sure that our students know not only what the Christian tradition and the classical writers, the Judeo-Christian tradition, the Western tradition, think about this, that, or the other thing, but that they understand what the best arguments against Christian views about morality, for example, are. I don't want to shield my students from Nietzsche. I want my students to read Nietzsche. I can't think of a more powerful critic of Christianity or the basic Christian moral outlook than Nietzsche. We don't need to shield our students from Nietzsche. If we're confident in our Christian faith, we should engage them. And in a serious way, not just let me give you 5 neat, fast arguments of how to refute Nietzsche. This is not apologetics. It's certainly not indoctrination. It means really trying to engage and think seriously about Nietzsche's criticisms with an open mind. I'm not afraid of that, and I don't think our schools should be afraid of that. And I think our schools will become more credible and more influential and will grow even more if we practice true paideia, true deep education, where we really are not indoctrinating our students, but educating them in the deepest possible way. So that's one thing that I would advise. I think it would be good, this is a secondary matter, but good to work on our PR.
Okay.
The best PR is just to produce a good product, produce good education, let the word seep out there, but we can help to move the word along a little bit, making sure that what we're doing has greater visibility, make sure that parents and others know that we're here for their children or grandchildren or for their children, their friends, or people who can be influential in making decisions about where kids end up in school. A lot of students who I think would flourish in classical Christian schools don't know about, or their parents don't know about classical Christian schools. They don't know that the option is available. I just learned from one of our fellow meeting participants here that there's only one classical Christian school in Manhattan. There are an awful lot of people in Manhattan. You know, it's a big city.
Wow. New
York City.
And my school's in LA, and the parents love it because it's a great alternative for them.
Yeah. I mean, there should be 20 classical Christian schools in Manhattan. I'm sure that the demand would be there if people really knew about it, and if municipal and state officials didn't make it difficult for parents to avail themselves of the opportunity for a classical Christian education for their children.
Well, that's all the questions I have. I just want to hear your reaction to this idea of, John Mark Reynolds. One of his visions is to sort of fold in some of the higher education tasks, units, topics into the high school kind of, or the calls it K through 16. He's folding in some of the higher education into the lower grades. And to me, what's so brilliant and subversive about that is it's almost cutting the colleges out of the system. If you don't want to play ball with our religious students and conservative students, we're going to do it ourselves. Do you think that is one of many good strategies?
Absolutely. There's probably no such thing as a new good idea. If it's a good idea, it's not new. And I want to give John Mark Reynolds full credit, but I can tell you the reason I know that this will work is what I witnessed when I was in graduate school at Oxford in England. The English system is different from the American system. Now it's got its problems and faults, and we wouldn't want to mimic everything in the English system. But although I was in graduate school, I knew a lot of undergraduates there, and the undergraduates were so impressive because they came in to the university with the equivalent, at least the equivalent level of knowledge of a college sophomore, or in some cases a college junior in the United States. It is possible to teach 15 and 16-year-olds, certainly 17-year-olds, Plato and Aristotle and Cicero and Euclid and John Locke and Thomas More and Martin Luther. It's possible for them to do what we, for some reason, consider college level work. So yeah, let's do it.